Episode of Spectrum Uncensored. Today I have with me Caroline from Brisbane. Thank you for your time today.
Hello, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. Did you want to tell me a little bit about what you were diagnosed with and when you were diagnosed?
Yeah, sure. So I was got a dual diagnosis in October 22, so both ADHD and autistic. Um, and I guess the ADHD part I'd kind of toyed with a few times through my life where I kind of go, oh, is that how my brain's working? And then it's like, no, but I'm not like those young boys that run around and can't sit still, or am I? you know, um, do I really sit still like all the other girls? No, I don't. But yes, it wasn't until a friend of mine that I've known for like 20 years, and she got diagnosed at the age of 55 or something. And I was talking to her, and I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, I've got ADHD, and I'm taking stimulants, and it's changed my life. And I'm like, but how? Like, what led you? And she started explaining why she was diagnosed. I'm like, but those are the reasons to why we're so similar. And she's like, I know, and maybe you should kind of go and have a chat to someone about this. So she sent me all the links to all the Instagram pages and YouTube videos, and so I guess I did a bit of a hyper focus on what my own neuro logical development, and then in the ADHD stuff, of course, autism and ADHD are so interlinked in so many ways. I kind of like went, oh, like, so by the time I think I had my appointment with the psychologist in August, so that I went to psychologist route. I was this, I do have a lot of respect for psychiatrists, but I know they pathologize a lot. So I wanted to see a psychologist because I wanted to kind of understand more of the behavior as opposed to the pathology.
Yep.
So I went and I had an intro kind of interview with a psychologist that specializes in older women assessing for neurodivergent possibilities. And they kind of went, yeah, definitely come in and get assessed. But, because I was kind of just going, oh, yeah, ADHD. They're like, well, maybe that, maybe autism too. You'll get two for the price of one and a half. I'm like, great. Because at that point I was still like not quite sure myself. And yeah, they said, look, we can't guarantee, because without the assessment, obviously that's why we're doing it, but we definitely recommend that you do both.
You know.
And then, I'm like, oh, okay. And then, so then I think it took them a while to write up the report and whatnot. So it was October I kind of got the final diagnosis. And it's a funny period. And I think anyone that's kind of a little bit, kind of got them to know themselves in the light of being neurotypical, but not really fitting in. And then you get that diagnosis. So I was 44. So then all of a sudden I'm going, get the diagnosis, you go, oh, wow, that's amazing, because now I finally understand myself. And then you go like on this massive high, and then you crash because you start grieving all of those things that didn't happen, all the support that little girl didn't get, and all of the not missed opportunities as such, but kind of not understanding yourself and beating yourself up for not being able to do the things that you should be doing. And then I think I sort of landed somewhere where I'm like, I actually really like myself now for the first time in my entire life, because it's okay to be me and I don't have to try anymore. So I think that's kind of like when I finally, all of that, like when the dust settled, I'm like, I don't have to try to be all those things anymore. I can just be me and it's okay. I'm not missing out on doing things because I'm not doing them the right way. I can just go off and do them my way. So yeah, awesome in the end.
Yeah, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. I think I was the same when I was diagnosed. It was one of those things where you celebrate that knowledge that you now have, and it's empowering to know. I mean, it doesn't define you as a person, but you know what I mean. Like, who you are, kind of thing. Why you do what you do. But then, you do crash. You end up with having to unpack all that trauma that you went through that you didn't even realize was trauma. You just thought it was normal. Then you realize, no, it wasn't. And I know what you mean. It's a bit, my son is autistic and ADHD. He's nonverbal as well. And even when he was diagnosed, there was a bit of a grieving process, and people are very, very judgy about that. You'll say you grieved, and people are like, well, that's inappropriate. They didn't die, but you're grieving like what you thought it was or what you
Yeah.
thought was going to happen. It's not. It doesn't mean that you don't love that person any less. Or,
No.
but yeah, it's just unless you've kind of gone through it, you're not going to quite understand. Yeah, that roller coaster ride. But ultimately, I felt much more happier knowing
Mm.
what I now know. I wouldn't change being diagnosed or anything. I don't think I've come across anybody who's gone, I regret being diagnosed. So,
No.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's an awesome community to be part of as well. It's
yeah,
very, yeah.
yeah,
Because, that was one of the things that I really disagree with when it comes to my diagnosis and my report. Like, a lot of it was around my communication, how I communicate doesn't fit into that neurotypical kind of round hole, and I'm a very square peg.
yeah,
Um, and I'm like, but actually, I am really good at communicating, but I communicate best. And then I realized I started looking around in my friendship circle, and there's a whole bunch of other undiagnosed
yes,
people that I completely gel with. Yeah, so it's actually yeah, we're different, but we're all we work so well together. So yeah, I think that's probably the best thing really about being diagnosed is that, I mean, you can obviously be part of the MD community without having a formal diagnosis, but it kind of, yeah, helps you just feel like, identify with this group
yeah,
of people, and it's
yeah.
good
It
because we all
it does
get
it.
each other.
It like solidifies things and it grounds you a little bit more because you have that like that solid confirmation, I suppose. Because
Yeah,
otherwise, you're always going to have that little bit of doubt in the back of your mind, even though you wouldn't even be questioning it if you were neurotypical. You just
yeah,
wouldn't. You wouldn't be like, I wonder. And
yeah,
yeah, it's funny when you get diagnosed and then you realize you've been surrounded by neurodivergent people all
yeah,
along. And
yeah,
yeah, and it's very similar for me with the except I got diagnosed and then my best friend got diagnosed. We'd talk more and more about it. Our kids got diagnosed and then we were like, oh, yep, they get this from me. They get that from, my partner and all
mm,
that kind of thing. And before we knew it, we were all diagnosed and it all just made
yeah,
sense. And it was like, oh, that's why I like you so much. And I don't like those people, and I don't gel. Like you
yeah.
don't gel with every neurodivergent person you come
No,
across, um, but certainly I feel like you just have that kind of radar, like when you come across
yeah,
a neurodivergent person, there's times where I'll see people walking down the street now, I'm like, neurodivergent, like straight away,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
haven't even
yeah.
said a word to me. So
Yes, that's right.
it's just,
But the mask goes off straight away, doesn't it? Because you just know, oh, I don't have to worry. This person gets me. It's like the
yeah,
wavelength is there.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I still
definitely.
find now and then that I mask and I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, why am I
Yeah.
masking? It's just that trauma response and that,
Mm,
um, like I get RSD pretty bad and I
mm.
kind of, even though I know my friends are my friends and they're not going to like just abandon me if I say something wrong because we're human, we do that. But it's just weird. Yeah, I'm like, why am I masking around this person that's known me for such a long time and they haven't
No,
left
because but
until now?
no, but
So
you're used to it though. You know what I mean? Like that. It's like it's a pattern of behavior that's been stuck for so long. It's I talk to my clients about this, like a lot of, but especially ADHD. I'm sure there's the same for autism, but like in ADHD is kind of where I've thought about it and talked about it a lot. Like if you get diagnosed as a child, you can sort of build up ways of working around your executive function kind of not being ideal at all times. Um, but if as an adult, if you get diagnosed like in your 30s, your 40s with your ADHD, there's certain things that you kind of go, well, you're kind of stuck with certain behavioral patterns. And if they unfortunately are less kind of productive behavioral patterns, it's really hard to reprogram them. And
yep,
it's the same with masking. Like there's certain situations where this is, we mask when we do this thing. And, with that person, you've known them forever. So that's how you behave with them. I think there's so much to be said for early intervention in that
yes,
sense, and I think that was part of, like, that can be part of my kind of grieving process still as I'm learning more about this. Um, that having an early diagnosis and have early interventions and not just sort of behavioral, but speech pathology, or like what I do as a naturopath, I see different impacts of my work with young children or teenagers or adults. Like it's just, yeah. But
Yeah.
neuroplasticity, right? We can learn anything at any age. So,
Yeah, I just find that like a lot of people I've come across and spoken to about like early interventions and things like that, often it gets a little bit of a, not a bad rap, but people tend to associate intervention with changing the person, but it is, I mean,
yeah,
good intervention, appropriate intervention isn't to change the person, it's to help the person cope and regulate
yeah,
and all those
exactly.
kinds of things. So it's, yeah, it's really hard to kind of navigate all those different things, especially once you've gotten to, as you say, an older person and you've had all that trauma and you mask, it's a trauma
Exactly.
response, it's just an automatic thing. So
Yeah,
many people end up with PTSD on top of their other
yeah,
diagnoses
exactly.
because I don't
They
think you
live
can
through,
kind of,
yeah,
yeah, you
yeah, they
can't go
live
through
through
it.
being undiagnosed. So I get a, I don't know if you've introduced myself before with this, but like what I do is I am a naturopath, right? So, and I treat or support a neurodivergent community, being neurodivergent myself. And sometimes I get mums bring their kids into clinic and they're kind of on the cusp of maybe starting to suspect that their child is neurodivergent, but they're not quite sure whether they want a diagnosis or, and usually these children struggle with like quite severe anxiety. And that to me is like, okay, so you need to like create a way for this child to just be able to do life, like you said, without the trauma, like having trauma of trying to fit into this world,
Yep.
and and then you sort of navigate that conversation where sometimes a diagnosis is better because then you can support your child in a more concise way. And then it's like, well, yeah, but I don't want the labels. It's like, yes, I understand that the label doesn't have to be negative, and that's where I think we need to there's so much that needs to be changed, like that whole pathologizing of autism and
Yes.
ADHD. It's not just the negatives, it's not just the deficits. There's so many amazing things that come with it as well. So yeah, there's a lot. I do a lot of educating in my clinic with parents, especially sort of parents that are new to the neurodivergent journey. Yeah, and
Yeah, yeah.
definitely that they kind of go, oh, so my child's neurodivergent, but I'm not, and I'm like, yes, yes, no, you're not. Yeah,
I get that a lot. Even with people I interview, they'll say to me, "Oh, yes, I've got neurodivergent kids, but my husband and I are neurotypical." I'm like, "Are you though?"
mm,
And then as soon as they start talking, I'm like, "You're not neurotypical," but we'll just go with that for now. but
yeah, that's right.
but
Yeah.
what kind of things do you work on? Because I know that there's a lot of connection with specifically autism and gut health, things like that. So, what kind of things as a naturopath do you focus on for the neurodivergent community?
Yeah, so well, really, there is gut health can be like a comorbidity or sort of like a presentation often seen, but I really do focus on the individual in front of me. So every
Yep.
person that comes in is very different. Um, and I was actually chatting to another naturopath this morning, and I was kind of saying like, so the kids that come and see me, they usually come and see me because they've had a diagnosis or they're struggling with something that's kind of relating to being neurodivergent, trying to go to school or whatever. Like there's a lot of stressors. It's a lot of nervous system, like a lot of anxiety, um, low self esteem, and yes, there can definitely be problems with eating as well. So ARFID,
Yep.
and PDA type presentations, which is often nervous system. Like it all comes back to being overwhelmed. When you're kind of really backed into that corner and you're just so, I can't deal with any more input of any kind right now. I'm just overwhelmed and I'm constantly in fight and flight. You're only going to eat the foods that feel safe and that you know what they feel like. As soon as we start calming that nervous system down and making these little kids feel a bit more safe in themselves, they all start trying new foods, like without fail. So, and they all feel it's more okay to go to school because they can deal with that constant input more. So more nervous system and stress and anxiety than gut, really. Like there's obviously a huge correlation between gut health and mental health. Like as we know, that gut brain axis, everyone's probably heard about that. Um, in the adults that I see, it's more like adults come and see me because I'm neurodivergent, so I'll get them.
Yep.
And then they have all of the other things wrong with them. I think so. They can like, so I'm kind of like a generalist for my adults. But obviously there's always like that kind of neurodivergent element of that, same as the kids, like the nervous system, like just being able to cope, with because we just take in so much information all the time. It's overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's nothing works properly if you're, as you say, in fight or flight mode. My son's very similar. He's gone through periods of not wanting to eat anything because he's so, I guess, highly strung, and
Yeah.
just doesn't know. You just go into that kind of self-preservation mode of um, almost not wanting to be seen, kind of thing. Like, you just,
Yeah.
if I don't do anything, then I'll be okay. So it's very even just traumatic to watch, especially with children, not being able to kind of advocate for themselves properly. And
Yeah.
even as you were saying with communication, there's so many different ways to communicate, and unfortunately a lot of the ways that neurodivergent people communicate, it's not really recognized. And I find that I struggle a lot with my son with that because he's nonverbal or non-speaking. Um, he he has lots of different ways he communicates, and they're all valid, but he's constantly day in day out invalidated by people
Mm.
because he doesn't have words come out of his mouth. So
Yeah.
it's it's definitely really tricky, trying to advocate for each and every child too, because as you say, everybody's different, and often neurodivergent people are put in a box of just like, oh, you're neurodivergent, there's your box. And it's like, well, we don't do that
Yes.
to neurotypical people. You have a
No.
personality, and
Yeah.
you have your
Yes,
likes and your dislikes.
absolutely. And even from so like from a naturopathic perspective, like I try to re-educate a lot of my peers because they kind of like when it comes to presentations like being nonverbal or what people sort of see as the more extreme versions of neurodivergence or the like on the end of the spectrum, like, well, some of it is maybe not actually being neurodivergent. Some of it is just having had an exposure to something, let's say mold toxicity or heavy metal toxicity, right? That
Yep.
actually does impact our neurological development. And even as if a neurotypical adult would get exposed to mold, they would have a lot of very similar um, presentation, like in symptoms, to a
Yep.
young neurodivergent person. But the not young neurodivergent person, because they're neurodivergent, they're labeled as that's part of their neurodivergence, that they're behaving that way. And I'm like, but so the mold exposed neurotypical adult, what do we call them? Like, are
Yep.
we putting a label on them? No, they're having neurological difficulties and all these things going on, but because they're neurotypical, it's mold exposure. Like,
Yep.
so I get quite sort of fired up about that because that's why I always treat each person that comes into my clinic as an individual. And I go, okay, so yes, you're neurodivergent, but what's going on for you? Let's try to work out, what is it that you want help with? And what can we sort of look at and actually support you into the best version of your life, best quality of life for you, and sort of peel back those things that are actually just like exposure from external environment, and also like the whole stress and we kind of we internalize a lot of things and a lot of like anxieties and things that we can't cope with the outside, or we've got things that are unresolved on the inside. We inherit a lot of stuff like from how our parents behave, and then we and mums, like as mums, we don't realize sometimes how much we teach our children in terms of behavior. So
Yep.
which can be quite confronting.
Yep.
We go, oh, why are you so stressed all the time? Oh, that's right, you're mirroring me. Great.
Yeah.
Well, you're
Yeah.
welcome.
Co-regulation.
Yeah,
Co-regulation,
that's right.
isn't it? It's like, it sounds so easy, but it's really not. And
Oh no.
like you say, it sounds like your job has a lot of like observation within it, because like I find, I guess I preach it more because my son's non-speaking, but behavior is communication. So for us,
Mm.
watch what he does, and it's like, okay, why are you doing that? Lots of people just go, oh, that kid's naughty, or oh, that kid's just not getting what they want, or whatever. It's always got that negative connotation to it, and as you say, there's less deficit based and things like that. But you you wouldn't do that if you could see what the problem was. Like if he's, got a severed leg or something like that, it's going to be like, oh,
Yeah.
he's screaming because I can see there's blood and he's in
Yes.
pain. But if it's
Yeah.
internal, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't
Yeah.
count.
Yeah.
So,
No, absolutely. That's so very true. And that's why each person has its own story to tell, and its own reason to have arrived to where that person is. So, and I've seen some amazing turnarounds in clinic, from kids that come in and like struggle to interact with the world at all, just can't take instructions or express anything except just sort of, bodily movement to, sitting down and like listening to my instructions and giving me a kiss on the cheek before they leave. So I've got
yep,
some like beautiful stories of children that, just really, and then it's like, yeah, maybe that person will never like completely gain communication, as a neurotypically, but they've gone from not being able to do anything with anyone to actually interacting with me and listening. And I've got a
yep.
dog that I bring to clinic, and so the kids can kind of interact with that and stuff like that. And so I can really gauge how they're kind of going as well in terms of improvements. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing what animals can do too. They can be quite soothing, and my son's always been scared of like random dogs. If it's not his dog, he's like, and he's not very trusting of it. But since we've been able to calm his nervous system down and get him out of that fight or flight response, he doesn't seem as jumpy around things like that. He's like, oh, that
Yeah.
one's like just more reasoning skills. He can see, oh, that one's on a
Yeah.
lead. It's not going to come running towards me. Whereas before, if
Yeah.
it was on a lead, it didn't matter. He was trying to climb up us to get away. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you can see the different stages of where they're just slowly, breaking
Yeah.
down those walls and yeah, calming their whole selves kind of thing. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
have you been a naturopath very long, or like was the naturopath kind of thing from the neurodivergence? Do you feel, or like how do you reckon? Like, how did you come to? I
Becoming a
guess,
naturopath.
yeah, yeah,
Well, it was actually when my kids were quite young. I wasn't at optimal health myself.
yep,
I had this long career in corporate project management, had babies, wasn't feeling very well. Went to the GP and I said, I'm not feeling very well. Can you do some tests? And he ran some tests and he went, well, yeah, look, the results are not amazing, but you're not sick enough for me to give you any medication yet. I'm like, what? That doesn't sound right to me. You want me to go away and get sicker so you can
yeah.
help me?
Come back when you're worse. Yeah,
Yeah. So I went away and I sort of did just some Googling. I'm like, how do I fix this thing? And just sort of stumbled across nutrition and nutritional supplements. I'd kind of never really, except for taking B vitamins when you had a hangover, I kind of hadn't really done any of that stuff before. Um, and then sort of fast forward a few years, and someone actually kind of said, you can study nutrition. And I'm like, oh, really? There's a bachelor. And I'm like, wow. And then as I studied the bachelor, I then sort of actually discovered naturopathy. So I'd never actually been to a naturopath myself before I started
okay,
studying to become one.
yep,
So, so it's a 4-year science degree. It took me 6 years to get through it. And I finished 3 years ago. So I worked in product development for a product company, so a supplement company first, and now I'm running my own business for 2 years.
yep,
Yeah, so as the neurodivergent naturopath. So, I'm neurodivergent and I see neurodivergent people, but I see non-neurodivergent people too,
yep,
neurotypicals.
yeah.
um,
The other side.
yeah, those ones. But they're usually I always wonder about my non-neurodivergent clients if they're really
Yep.
non-ND.
Yeah. But it sounds kind of like the timeline, it kind of brought you to a diagnosis in a way. Like, because did you start your business just after you were diagnosed?
No, just
It's
before. So
just before.
I'd had my own practice for maybe 5 months before I got my diagnosis. But it
Yep.
was like the journey was very much like at the same time as I started my business, my friend sort of started telling me that she'd been
Yep.
diagnosed. So I'm like, oh, so that was kind of happening at the same time. Yeah. So then it
Yep.
kind of, when I got my diagnosis, I'm like, this is it. I want to help everyone. You know?
Or special interest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hyperfocus.
Yeah. It's amazing how all that kind of stuff intertwines. Everyone I speak to, there's some sort of intertwining with what they do and I guess who they are, kind of thing. And that's nice
Yeah,
because at least you're doing something that you're passionate about and that you like and that
yeah,
you know, enjoy, and you can make a difference um, to the people's lives. It's kind of like the whole be the person you wish you'd had at the beginning type situation, I
yes.
feel. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I don't have
it's
Monday-itis anymore because I actually really love what I do. So it's like, sure, I love the weekend, but when it's Monday, I'm like, I get to go and help people. You know, like
yeah,
it's awesome.
I
Yeah.
love that. And why do you think your profession's so important? Because it's, you know, I've obviously seen lots of people are very skeptical about things like naturopath and all that kind of thing. So it's, yeah, I just find it interesting that I don't know
Yeah.
why people find it
Look,
so
I
controversial
in
in
an
some ways.
ideal world, sorry, in an ideal world, we'd work together. Like we have such different tools, right? So often I find, especially with young autistic kids that are really dysregulated, the doctors don't have any tools to help them calm down. They can put them on antipsychotics. That's pretty much it, or heavy, antidepressants, and just whack pharmaceutical after pharmaceutical after pharmaceutical on them, and it doesn't really help. Like I've got some really so big cases, like a few young kids that are just they're really struggling, and then by the time they get to me, like the list is long, right? So because we approach it from a completely different way, and we kind of try to calm that nervous system, support the gut health, find out, is there anything in the environment? Is there some heavy metal toxicity, which there often is in the kids that are really dysregulated and really struggling to kind of get into any kind of normality, like of their own normality, right?
Yep.
There's usually kind of some kind of exposure from outside that's just impacted the neurological development. Um, that's kind of where we can come in. Like, or in an ideal world, that's where medicine and naturopathy would meet, and we would actually work together there. Um, the best cases that I've got, like I am inadvertently working with other health professionals, but not necessarily that we call each other, but the mums are very strong and very instrumental in using our advice together. And usually the medical professionals are very open to what I'm doing. So their best results. That's just the way it is, because like complementary medicine is like really powerful that way. But a lot of the time, when we're in that real fight and flight for a long time, we burn through a lot of nutrients. And then we also then, because we then get ourselves backed into the corner and we can't eat anything except safe foods. And when we're fight and flight, our rest and like our digestion just like really craps together. We're not, so that's where you're like, your gut health goes out the window. All of those things mean that we see like real nutritional deficits in these kids, and that's always my starting point. I'll sort of find them and I'll start plugging those holes, and that's when we sort of start seeing like real improvement. It's slow because usually as well these kids struggle to take any kind of supplements, so like it's a bit of a it's a journey, and the parents have to like be on board 100% and know that it's a long sort of slow process, but it's really successful. And it's amazing. It's like the best feeling in the world to help these kids and adults. Yeah.
I just find it very interesting because I've never gotten or gone and seen a naturopath for my son, but I've been considering it because he's got a lot of like constipation issues, things like that. So what you're saying makes sense to me. It's very like I see when he's no longer constipated and things like that, that he just has much more a love of life. He's just more,
Yeah.
up and running around
Yeah.
and doing the things that I guess a kid should be doing. But he's
Yeah.
quite flat when he's having those issues. So I find that, yeah, a lot of what you're saying kind of resonates because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And
it's interesting.
there's a direct link between constipation and not making enough serotonin. So there's like a So we actually make up to 80% of our serotonin and dopamine in our gut. So if that's not
Yep.
working properly, we're just not going to be feeling ourselves, not just because it's uncomfortable, but because we're literally unable to, create those really important neurotransmitters. So, you see it really clearly in him,
Yes. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
interesting because a lot of people I speak to have very similar problems for their children with things like constipation. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely
It's a
something to
huge,
think
yeah, it's
about.
a
I might
huge
have to come and
thing.
see you.
Yeah, you're more than welcome.
Where can we find you? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me, the neurodivergentnaturopath.com.au is my website.
Yep.
It's my handle on social media as well, the neurodivergent naturopath. So
Yep.
yeah, both on Insta and Facebook. Yeah,
Yep.
and so
Awesome.
I'm in Brisbane, in where the clinic I work in is right next to Marta in
Yep.
Wollongabba. Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm
Yeah.
online as well. I literally see people from all over Australia, and I reckon like
Yep.
80% of my appointments are online because it's, even if you are in Brisbane, a lot of people find it really hard to take their dysregulated
Yep.
neurodivergent kid into this clinic and meet this lady, and they're like, oh, So some people like it for the first appointment, so we can't, and I like it as well if it's possible, because then I get like a really good relationship with the child, because they
Yep.
can tell as well that I'm neurodivergent. I usually get a
Yes.
really good relationship with the kids. They're like, yeah, this lady knows what she's like. She knows me, you know?
Yep.
So I love that. And then, yeah, and then they just kind of come back like on follow-ups on telehealth. So yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Well, there's no excuse then. I
No,
know for me, going into the city is like flustering, but my son actually loves
yeah.
it. I'm like, why? Like, I don't understand why he thrives so much on that hustle and bustle. It's just, for me, it's just
Sensory
terrifying. I have to go,
seeking. It's like the crunchy chips, or loud noises, or whatever it is. Like, we seek some sensory stuff, and then other sensory stuff is like too much.
yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. I just wish we'd be more on par with each other with some things, but it's that push pull of like different people that just proves that everybody's different, and even with the same diagnoses, it doesn't mean that you're going to have the same likes and dislikes. So,
No,
but
gosh, no.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, no, I'll definitely check all that out. But thank you so much for your time today and having a chat with me. It's been amazing, and I've learned a lot. So that's a lot to think about.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was really lovely to talk.
Awesome. But if anybody ends up asking any questions or anything, if you're open to it, I'd love to have you back for a live Q&A or something at some point. And
Yeah,
yeah,
that'd be great. Yeah.
yeah,
All right,
awesome. Well, thank
fantastic.
you so much.
All right, no worries. Thank you.
See you later.